In this tutorial, I'm going to add a master fader track, automation, and do a bounce to disk. First, let's add that master fader track. Go to Project, Add Track, Master Fader Track. Now I have control over the overall level of my mix. I can do a fade in and fade out, and do a little bit of mastering, maybe some safety valve limiting, stuff like that. Next, I want to add automation. First of all, I have to make sure that automation is enabled for these tracks. So if I look at my mixing board, this is the automation section here. Notice that nothing is turned on. So if I press the play button, now automation is enabled on these tracks. There's no automation data in here yet. I could manually record it, press record, press play, and move the faders, but I want to do a more controlled mix, and I'm not going to have the levels change. I'll just have my level set, do fade in and fade out. I also want to do some bypassing of my delay effect so that that comes in and comes out at different points, not on during the entire sequence. So, a couple of places that we can see the automation. If I go to the sequence editor, this top box tells us what's in the foreground view of the track. Right now, sound bites is in the foreground view. I could choose something like volume. Right now there's no volume data yet, but that would be in the foreground. Let's pull this down so we see our master fader as well. Alright, another place we can see this is in the event list. So if I open the event list for one of these tracks, let's say this track here, you may know this list from MIDI tracks where it shows the MIDI notes and MIDI volume, MIDI panning, but it also shows for audio tracks all of the sound bites that are pasted in and any automation data. So it'll actually show volume controller panning, and we can edit it from here if we want to pinpoint some stuff. Okay, well, let's insert some automation. If you're just doing one level and want that level set and you've got the mix you want on your mixing board, the easiest way to enter it is all at once using the snapshot tool. Let me hide some inserts here and some sends so we can see it a little better. There's a little camera down here, and when you click that camera, it actually takes an automation snapshot where you're at relative to the counter and gets all these levels. So let's hear what we have now. Play just a little bit of this. Okay, we've got everything going through the delay plugins, coming out the master fader. Alright, so let's start by getting initial levels for everything with this snapshot, and we can go back later and make adjustments. So I just go to the camera, click it, and it says all time, which means it'll enter one value which will stay the same. Track shown in mixing board, that's all of my tracks. And the data visible. So right now I have volume and panning visible. All of a sudden a bunch of lines appeared here, and notice that if I look in my event list, here's a volume and panning value and an audio track mute. Right now it's not muted, meaning enabled. So I could actually adjust my value from here if I wanted to. Let's say I change this value from -9.5. I'm going to just click and hold the mouse and drag it down. It's actually making it negative infinity. Let's leave it at 56. Now when I press play, this value should jump down since my automation is enabled. And there it went down to 56. Okay, so if you know exactly the value you want, the event list is a nice place to enter it. Okay, going back to the sequence editor, we see these lines now in the background. If I was to change my foreground view and choose volume, now the volume line pops up. So let's say I wanted to do a little fade in on this track. I could add a point here, and I could take this point here and move it down, and maybe add one more point and move that down. Since I have the grid, snap to grid highlighted, these points will actually snap to the grid, which I may or may not want. So now we should see a fade in the mixer that matches this curve. Let's bring the mixing board up, rewind, and watch this fader and this line here. Okay, so now we have a little fade in. I could also go to the event list and work with this. So maybe I want to put a fade out after this last bar, maybe a fade out from bar 18 to bar 20. Let's go to that event list. I know exactly what I want. I want this volume level at bar 18, negative 9.8. So I'll do this. So choose volume, choose plus. I can say bar 18, give it a value of negative 9.5. And then I can say in bar 20, I want the same volume controller, but this time I want a value of negative infinity, which means faded out. So now if I look in this section, there's my fade out. I'll play it from here, bring the mixing board up, and we'll see this fading out. And there it goes. Alright, so a couple of different ways you can add breakpoints to your automation once it's already entered. There are lots of tools. You can do shapes with the automation and make beat-based panning, all kinds of stuff, which we'll cover at another time. Alright, one of my goals also was to add automation to this delay plugin. I don't want it to be doing a delay through the entire piece. I'd like it to delay just at the point where it's more sparse. So a couple ways I could do this. Since it's in an auxiliary track, I could actually have the auxiliary track muted or faded out and have it fade in when I want the delay to come in. Or I could actually bypass it and have bypass come on and off. Let's do that first, then I'll do the volume. Okay, let's say I do the bypass. We'll see what's available here. Not too much, but if I go to Insert, notice that it's got volume pan, but it also has a special menu for the Insert B, which is delay. And it shows all these values. These can all be automated, just like the volume and panning. So here's the bypass. Press OK. Now I've got a little pencil tool and I can draw to bypass. So I click that point. It says bypass. I click another point. Bring that up. And now it's off. So let's see, when we watch the delay, we should see the bypass going on and off relative to the sequence. Let's bring this over here so we can see both. Play. Okay, so the bypass just turned itself on. But we're still getting sound out of this track. We might not want that. So I'm going to take that automation out for the moment. So I can just highlight using the selector tool across this part of the track. Catch those points, press delete, and they're gone. So I'll use the volume automation on my auxiliary track. One of the advantages to having an effect on the auxiliary track. I'm actually going to leave it where it is. I like the delay sound at the beginning, but I'd like it to drop out right here at bar 6. So I'm going to put a point there and another point there. I'll just have it do a quick fade. So that's our volume. And I know I want it to come back in when it's sparse. So I'll put this point here and this point here. And let's play the whole thing now and see what we have. I'll zoom out a little bit so we can see more of it. And from the beginning with the mixing board showing over here. Our delay drops out. And our delay is back in. I'm going to do a couple more tweaks to the level. Make sure everything's playing the way it's supposed to. Okay. Like this delay, I think I want a little more delay level near the end. So I'm going to bring this point up, up, up. And I'd like it to fade out a little faster here. And now let's work with our master fader. Bring up the mixing board. Okay, it didn't look like anything was clipping, so I don't think I need to add any limiting. I'll do that on a later project. But let's do a fade in and fade out, just to be safe. So I'll start my fade in here. So it's faded all the way in by the time the first note comes in. And I'll do a fade out at the end. I'll kind of match what's going on up in the other track. And now we should have our piece complete. Let's hear it from the beginning. Alright, sounds good. I think we're ready for the bounce. The bounce to disk process is very simple. I simply select all. So it's going to select my entire sequence, all of the tracks. And then under audio, I'll choose bounce to disk. It asks about a couple of settings. I'll want to have this be probably a WAV file or an AIFF file, so I can burn it right to a CD. I could also go to MP3 if I wanted. Let's do WAV file. Now notice source, it says output analog 1 and 2. That refers to these outputs. They should all be matching already if you're hearing all your tracks out of the headphones, but you can double check that. It'll only take the ones who have the same output, mix them together. It'll give it a name by default. You can change it. And by default, it'll put it in your audio files folder inside your projects folder. So that all sounds good. Let's bounce it. It'll ask a little bit about any kind of compression or any data format changing. You can change bit depth and things. I think we want to leave it just like this. That'll make it the right file to burn to a CD. Interleaves stereo 44:1 16-bit. Okay, and it's doing the bounce. It doesn't need to do it in real time. It can go as fast as your computer can go. Okay, so if I open my project folder, here it is, and if I go to audio files, there's my files, and here's my mix file. I should be able to open that in iTunes and burn it to a CD. So let's open iTunes. And the easiest way to burn that track to a CD is to make a playlist and just have that one track and burn that playlist. So I'll do that. Okay, and I just simply drag this file into this playlist. And it may or may not play out of the headphones because of my configuration. Let's see. There it is. That's my mix file. It's ready to burn to a CD. And that's it.